Did you know that each year, cigarette factories produce more than 6 trillion cigarettes? Yes, 6 trillion. That's about 18 billion cigarettes made every single day. But here's the part that might shock you. Cigarettes can be made so quickly that it takes less than a second to roll, fill, and pack one. Now, if you'd like to learn about the cigarette making process in a factory, watch this video to the very end. The journey from leaf to factory. Tobacco farming is where the story of a cigarette truly begins. These plants are grown on farms that often stretch as far as the eye can see. Countries like the United States, Brazil, and India are some of the top producers. Farmers dedicate months to growing the plants, watering them, and protecting them from pests. The tobacco plant's leaves are its most valuable part, so they are carefully tended from the moment they sprout. Once the leaves mature, they're harvested by hand or machine, depending on the farm. But harvesting is just the start of their journey. The leaves need to be cured before they can even dream of becoming a cigarette. Curing means drying out the leaves, and there are different ways to do it. Some farmers use barns heated with wood or gas to dry the leaves, while others rely on the sun. The method used affects the tobacco's flavor. For example, air-cured leaves are often smoother, while sun-cured leaves have a richer, more intense flavor. After curing, the leaves are bundled up and sent to factories. This is where things shift from the hands of farmers to the high-speed world of machines. It's also where tobacco undergoes a total transformation. What happens when the tobacco arrives at the factory? When the tobacco leaves get to the factory, they're far from ready to be smoked. In fact, they still look like wrinkly old pieces of paper more than anything you'd see in a cigarette. The first step is sorting. Workers or machines check the leaves for quality, separating the good ones from the damaged or discolored ones. The best leaves go forward, while the rejects are often used in cheaper tobacco products or discarded. Once sorted, the leaves are processed into what's called a tobacco blend. This involves shredding the leaves into fine pieces, almost like confetti. But here's the thing, it's not just tobacco in that blend. Factories mix the shredded tobacco with other ingredients, including flavors and chemicals. These additions are what give each cigarette brand its unique taste. Some brands might add sweet flavors like honey or vanilla, while others add chemicals to help the tobacco burn slower or produce more smoke. But that's not all. The shredded tobacco also goes through a humidifying process to make sure it doesn't dry out completely. Dry tobacco would crumble to dust, and nobody wants that in a cigarette. This mix of shredded, moistened, and flavored tobacco is what finally moves on to the next stage of production. The paper isn't your regular notebook paper. The paper used in cigarettes isn't your typical office paper. It's a special type of paper designed to burn in a very controlled way. Think about it. If the paper burned too fast, the cigarette would be gone in seconds. If it burned too slowly, smokers would struggle to keep it lit. To get it just right, factories treat the paper with chemicals that control its burn rate. This paper usually comes in giant rolls that are shipped straight to the factories. Each roll can be hundreds of meters long, which means one roll can make thousands of cigarettes. The paper is thin but durable enough to hold the tobacco in place without ripping. The paper isn't plain white either. Factories sometimes print tiny patterns or logos on it for branding. But even the ink is special. It has to be safe to burn and inhale, which is a weird thought if you think about it too much. When the paper arrives at the machine, it's fed into a system that cuts and wraps it around the tobacco in one swift motion. This step is where the paper truly becomes part of the cigarette. How the cigarette takes shape. Now comes the most fascinating part, the rolling and shaping of the cigarette. Picture this. The shredded tobacco, which has been carefully prepared and flavored, is fed onto a white strip of cigarette paper. The strip moves through the machine at lightning speed, and as it goes, the paper wraps tightly around the tobacco to form a long, skinny tube. This is what you'd call a raw cigarette, and it's not quite ready yet. This tube doesn't stay in one piece for long. The machine slices it into smaller sections that are the exact length of a cigarette. Factories are very precise about this, because even a tiny mistake could make the cigarette unsellable. Each little section is rolled and pressed to make sure it's firm but not too tightly packed. If the tobacco is packed too tightly, it won't burn properly. If it's too loose, it'll fall apart. At this stage, the cigarette still looks a little plain. It doesn't have its filter yet, and it's not packed into boxes, but the basic shape is there, and you can finally recognize it as a cigarette. It's amazing how quickly this step happens. A single machine can shape and cut thousands of cigarettes in just a few minutes. Adding the filters. The filter is the finishing touch that turns a plain cigarette into the one you see in stores. Filters are usually made from material called cellulose acetate, which is a type of plastic that looks and feels like soft cotton. These filters are designed to catch some of the harmful chemicals in cigarette smoke, but they don't catch everything. In fact, they only trap a small fraction of the harmful stuff. Making filters is its own process. Factories use long rods of cellulose acetate, which are cut into smaller pieces. These pieces are then shaped and glued onto one end of the cigarette. The glue used is special too. It has to hold the filter in place securely, even when the cigarette gets hot from being lit. Filters also sometimes have tiny holes poked into them. These holes are meant to let in extra air when someone smokes, which can dilute the smoke a little. The studies have shown that this doesn't make cigarettes much safer. Surprisingly, the filters themselves can release tiny bits of plastic when burned, which can end up in a smoker's lungs. Once the filters are attached, the cigarette is finally complete. All that's left is packaging. But that's a whole other story. The final touches. The final steps of making a cigarette are all about making them look good and taste just the way customers expect. After the cigarettes are rolled, filtered, and cut into the perfect size, factories focus on branding and quality. This is where each cigarette gets its signature look. For example, some brands add thin colored lines near the filter or print their logo directly on the paper. These small details make each cigarette stand out and help smokers instantly recognize their favorite brand. Flavor is another big deal at this stage. Factories often spray the tobacco with special flavoring agents or add a tiny bit of menthol for that cool, minty taste. Some cigarettes are even designed to burn slower or smoother, thanks to extra chemicals added during the process. These little tweaks might not seem like much, but they can make a big difference in how a cigarette feels when smoked. Finally, the cigarettes are packed into boxes, which are sealed tightly to keep them fresh. Freshness matters a lot because stale cigarettes lose their flavor and quality. The boxes are then carefully loaded into bigger cartons, ready to be shipped all over the world. It's a surprisingly detailed process for such a tiny product. What's really inside a cigarette? You might think a cigarette is just tobacco wrapped in paper, but there's a lot more going on. Factories add over 600 chemicals to cigarettes during the production process, and when someone lights up, thousands of other chemicals are created in the smoke. Some of these are harmless, but many are anything but safe. Tar, for instance, is a sticky substance that can coat your lungs. Then there's carbon monoxide, the same gas that comes out of car exhaust, and formaldehyde, which is used to preserve dead animals. But wait, there's more. Cigarettes also contain things you'd never expect, like ammonia, which is found in household cleaners, and acetone, which is used in nail polish remover. Even arsenic, a poison found in rat poison, can be present in small amounts. These chemicals are added for different reasons. Some help the cigarette burn more evenly, while others enhance the flavor or make the smoke feel smoother. What's scary is that many of these chemicals are addictive. Nicotine, the main ingredient in tobacco, is one of the most addictive substances out there. It hooks people quickly, making it hard to quit smoking. So a cigarette is not just a simple stick of tobacco. It's a complex cocktail of ingredients that's been carefully designed to keep people coming back for more. The machines behind the madness. Making cigarettes isn't a slow, manual job. Factories rely on massive high-tech machines to churn out thousands of cigarettes in just minutes. These machines are so advanced that they can perform multiple tasks at once, like shredding tobacco, rolling it into paper, cutting it to size, and adding filters all in one go. You'd be amazed at how fast these machines work. In fact, a single machine can make up to 20,000 cigarettes in an hour. What's even more impressive is how precise these machines are. Every cigarette has to meet exact measurements for length, diameter, and weight. If one cigarette is even slightly off, it's rejected and doesn't make it into the pack. This level of accuracy ensures that every cigarette looks and feels the same, no matter which factory it comes from. These machines don't just make cigarettes, they also pack them into boxes, wrap the boxes in plastic, and prepare them for shipping. Some machines even include quality control features, like tiny cameras that check each cigarette for defects. It's a fully automated process with very little human involvement. The machines are the real heroes, or villains depending on how you see it, behind the cigarette industry. Where do all the cigarettes go? After all the effort to make cigarettes, you might wonder where they end up. Well, they go just about everywhere. Most cigarettes are sent to stores, gas stations, and vending machines. Some brands are so popular that they're sold in more than 100 countries. Smokers all over the world recognize these brands, which is why factories work hard to keep their products consistent no matter where they're sold. But selling cigarettes isn't just about filling shelves in local stores. Many factories export their products to other countries. For example, a cigarette brand made in the United States might be shipped to Europe or Asia. This global trade means that cigarette factories are always busy, keeping up with the demand. Not all cigarettes make it to stores though. Some are set aside for quality testing. Factories use special machines that smoke cigarettes to check if they burn properly and taste the way they should. This might sound strange, but it's an important step to ensure the product meets consumer expectations. So whether you see them at a corner shop or a fancy airport duty-free store, remember that those cigarettes traveled a long way to get there. It's a massive operation that spans the entire globe. But what do you think about cigarettes in general? Good or bad? Head to the comments and share your thoughts. And if you'd like to learn more about how things are made in motion, hit the subscribe and notification buttons. And we'll see you in the next video.